Evil Ed from Drumline Magazine, here with one of the most iconic drummers of our time, Mr. Kenny Aronoff.
Evil Ed? Why do they call you Evil Ed?
Because I'm the nice one.
Oh, it's a joke.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
You're so nice that they call you evil.
Evil. Hey, there you go.
Well, that's better than being evil.
That's true. That is true. And the first time that I saw you play would have been with John Cougar.
Oh, up here in
Vancouver.
We had, talk about iconic, that we had iconic shows up here.
Yeah.
Canada embraced us immensely, and we could come up here and sell out all the hockey arenas, and you guys were crazy about us. It was we felt much appreciated and loved because of it.
And some of your work on those albums, which...
Yeah, you know what? Now that I'm looking back on it, because I'm writing a book now with somebody, and it's very few bands make records like that anymore. And then
yes.
Because of that, it's real simple. I mean, it's like back then, the labels had money. I mean, they had money. They sold records, and when you sell records, the labels make lots of money, and then they can invest in bands.
Right.
And they invested in us to the point where we were rehearsing like a business, 8-10 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
John expected us to. I mean, it wasn't. It was a hang, but he demanded a lot. He wanted a career. He got what he wanted. He was like your baddest ass football or hockey coach you could ever imagine.
Right.
Demanded so much from all of us, and you know, they didn't want us to make it a one-hit wonder. They weren't looking for the things that people are looking for now, like let's make it right away. They didn't want it because they wanted a slow progress. If you have a one hit, are you ready to go into an arena? No, you aren't.
No.
First of all, you don't have enough material.
Right.
Second of all, are you really ready to go into the arena? By the time we hit the arenas, we belonged there.
Right.
We were comfortable. We knew how to control 20,000 people. We knew how to pace a 3-hour show.
Right.
We knew so much, and so by the time we got there, we deserved it. And you know, like when I got on board, it was American Fool, which became the #1 record of the year in America and up here. 2 humongous hits, Jack and Diane, which featured me.
That drum lick.
Dude, I had to come up with that on the spot, fighting for my job. I thought I was going to get fired, and I had to come up with that. It was the most fearful moment, but you know, those are like life-changing experiences. Then from that record, it's which had Pink Houses and Crumbling Down, the Authority song. There's one other hit, and then John decided he was going to try to make the record at home and not go to L.A. So they brought a mobile unit up, and he took over his sister's and her husband's old shitty little farmhouse on a pig farm, and put up, did it really like conservatively, put up drywall and did the electrical right, and we made a record in there. And then next thing is, and then he bought a little old house about maybe 8 miles from his house in Indiana, and turned it into a studio and offices. And next thing you know, we're making records now at home. And then that was the Scarecrow record, which then put us into the arenas.
Right.
And on the record, we went out and did small venues. We figured out what our seating capacity was. It was like 35 to 8,000, and we would John wanted to be the headliner, but we'd do smaller venues. We were grooming our way up to the top. Meanwhile, the record company kept investing money, and eventually it worked. They made their money back tenfold, because for every $1 they gave John, he gets 15 cents, and they get 85 cents.
Right.
And he had to pay back, so that's 15%. They're getting 85%. He had to pay back the money he owed them based on his 15%.
Right.
So that's. But everybody
the
made
business
money.
of rock.
Yeah, the business of rock. They made money. Nowadays, nobody does. I mean, the Foo Fighters do it. Some bands like Queens of the Stone Age, their band. But most bands don't even have that business model doesn't exist because there's no money. The real sad part is, I record in my studio a lot of unsigned artists, because I have to, because there are no budgets. So I have this killer studio with a lot of expensive gear, so I sound like Kenny Aronoff. And these small budgets, the kids are telling me how people don't even want to rehearse. They don't even want to jam. They want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, Wayne Gretzky could never win a game by shooting by himself.
Right.
He needed to pass to somebody.
Right.
It's about anything team is, even in corporations, anything team is going to win.
It's about the unit.
Yeah, it's going to win. You got more weapons. You bounce things off people.
Sure.
You're talking. You get ideas. Somebody says something or plays something. And if you got a brain in your head, you're listening. You go, son of a bitch. I'm going to try it. Now I'm going to play different.
Right.
It's so you ask one question and I talk for 10 minutes. But, man, you asked the right question. I mean,
I like it.
It's just so different now. And so you got to see us, and I got to live in a time that was so fruitful and so creative. And sorry to say, man, but the arts always reflect what society's at. So the world has changed, and it will keep changing.
Sure.
And you can't stop that, but those were great times.
Those were great days because the companies would develop the bands.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, and you could develop with the artist.
Yeah.
And you grew with the artist. Because they said, you know what? Just keep selling more records as we go along.
Yeah, and you can keep getting more money, but the biggest thing is the talented artists did grow. And it was good for the audience, and it was good. I mean, I just got a record deal, whatever that means. Somebody wants me to put a record out. So I'm thinking like summer of '69, what was on the radio, what were we buying?
Yeah.
And that ironically, that was I listed. The whole thing was based on what is your influences as you were growing up, and you know Hendrix, Cream, Zeppelin, Pink. I mean, what I'm thinking about. Oh shit! Everybody. I mean, there's so many artists. Joni Mitchell, the Stones. Who am I thinking? Let's say Cream, the Doors. Eventually Black Sabbath. The heavy stuff. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And then I was going to pick artists that I've recorded with to sing those songs.
Yeah.
Well, you look at the summer of '69, and all those bands were there already. I mean, it was just unbelievable. You got Jethro Tull, and then you got the Who, and then you got Zeppelin, and you got Cream and Hendrix, all coming out at the same time. I mean, each one of those bands, Queen, they're all Black Sabbath. They're all like completely different.
Sensory overload.
Well, people those bands were living together and living as a band in a house and trying to create and
that's a lost art.
It's a lost art.
It's a lost art today. I mean, when I started playing, it was the same thing. It was like a gang.
Yeah.
Right? It was like a gang, and it was like, we're gonna do something.
We're gonna do something.
We're gonna do something.
Just start with that. We're gonna do something.
Yeah.
We're gonna do something. And you're smiling. You're like you, the audience. You're smiling because you're loving this stuff, right? You're thinking like, shit, they are so right. When I was on tour with Chickenfoot last year with Sammy Hagar.
Which we saw you, and you guys were
did?
Awesome.
Wasn't that amazing? That was
Kevin Dugan's a good friend of ours.
Oh, wow.
So
that was such a badass tour for me because it was everything that I'm talking about, but everybody grew up through that. Mm-hmm. So, there's another band, Van Halen. I mean, completely different from the other bands. And everybody was in bands, and everybody, Sammy's attitude was like, man, you can't do anything wrong. If you play the wrong part, you're rewriting tonight. That's what an attitude. He says, you're rewriting. You just wrote a new section, Kenny. I only did that once, so I just didn't stop the song. I just loved it so much.
Keep
I
going.
wanted another chorus. Kenny's a great composer.
Those were some of the best shows I saw because it showed, when you guys were
everything
playing.
We're talking about.
Oh, exactly.
Parts and jamming.
And you're talking. You got you.
Satriani,
Michael Anthony, Satriani, Hagar leading. You know what I mean? It didn't get any better than that.
It doesn't. I felt like I was in Zeppelin and Van Halen.
Yeah.
What the fuck? It didn't get any better than that. That was what you call supergroup. That was like, that band had, everybody was at 98% at their worst day. The quality of musicianship, feel, time, ears, experience. Anyway.
And you guys looked happy.
Oh, that was the happiest tour I've ever been on.
And it showed.
Yeah.
And it was very cool.
Isn't that great? If you hadn't been in a band and been in that gang, you wouldn't have recognized because you grew up through that whole thing.
Exactly. And talk about some of the albums if you can. I mean, that you with Meatloaf that you played on.
That's ridiculous.
Elton John.
Yeah.
People don't know that. The Rolling Stones.
Yeah. I'm on
Mick Jagger.
Yeah. Alice Cooper, Alice Cooper, let's see, Tony Iommi and me and Glenn Hughes did a trio. We were going to be a band, but Sharon Osbourne brought back Sabbath back. But we were going to be a band, and Tony but we all want to do another record. That was like amazing. That was, and then, but then they recorded with Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson in the country world.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't
it's
it?
Like,
I mean, just the good stuff.
Yeah. Joe Cocker, Alanis Morissette, Avril Lavigne from Canada. There's a whole bunch of Canadian bands. Corey Hart. And
Aldo Nova.
You
did that on the connection with John Bon Jovi's album, which was another #1 hit you played on.
Yeah.
Was
it
Blaze of Glory?
Blaze of Glory, number one.
That was the connection with that.
Yep, exactly. You did your homework.
I did my homework.
I'm on 2 Rod Stewart singles right now. First 2 singles. John Fogerty, we just did duets records, so I mean, you're playing with John Fogerty, Keith Urban, John Fogerty, Brad Paisley, John Fogerty, Bob Seger. 3 Bob Seger records I was on. Santana. I mean, the legends.
Tell the story to everybody, because I don't think people have heard this story, and I've heard this story before. When you were recording with Alice Cooper, when you were doing the Alice Cooper album.
Paul McCartney?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to tell that story.
Okay, so I was supposed to do Alice Cooper's record, but I was booked. So they tried these other drummers out, and it wasn't working. And so now I have to try to do 12 songs in 3 days because of the budget, which what I do is I come in and I write these extremely detailed charts. And I listen to the songs. And I was listening to the first song, and I went, all right, everybody just leave the room, leave me in here, because the drum parts were so involved. They were they were programmed, and the guitar parts and the bass parts and the vocals went with those drum parts. And I went, I'm gonna have to, really stick close to this. And then I put my own fills and change things, but start with that. So I leave the room and I write these things out, and then I go out and kind of run through this stuff. Then we start recording, and it would be 2-3 hours. Was it that long? Maybe it was more like 2.5 hours. Then start the next one. All of a sudden I see a hand knocking from outside of the room in, being polite. I'm like, I'm on the phone with Don Was, this big producer, and I went, come on in. And they didn't hear me. They knocked again. I said, come on in. It's Paul McCartney. And he was recording next door. I went, holy shit, Don, I gotta get off the phone. It's McCartney. Don goes, the other one was cooler. You meaning John Lennon? I went, the other one's dead. There's Paul McCartney.
There's the story.
So Paul comes in and for 45 minutes entertained us. He was looking for Alice, just to say hi to him, and he was so charming and so friendly. And it dawned on me, holy shit, they just put out his CD called #1 Hits. They were on the cover of Rolling Stone. I went, God, congratulations, dude. You're like you're on the cover of Rolling Stone again. And all these number hits. When they put that CD together, I listened to it and I went, that's a great bunch of songs. I wouldn't change anything. I'm like, no kidding. I wouldn't change anything either. What are you going to change?
Exactly, perfection.
It was amazing. He was funny. He was so funny.